Hello and welcome to this mini masterclass, which is all about social media liberation. So I want to just start by sharing that I am not saying you shouldn't use social media. It can actually be used for positive, and I have a lot of reasons to be grateful for it. So I found it especially helpful during the first couple of years of the scam that started early 2020, in order to share truth and to connect with others who are on a similar path, and to give people exposure to me as well, and a feel for me and what I'm about, and to help others with my content. But I recently made a decision, which some may consider radical, to actually stop using all social media. And I actually share about this personal decision and that experience in my podcast episode number 4, which is called Bye Bye Social Media. And if you personally feel that social media is really positive for you, it feels great to use it, and it feels in resonance with you, then by all means, keep doing it. But I'm imagining that if you're watching this, that isn't the case. So almost everybody that I've spoken with lately, whether it's on message or actually, voice, spoken to in voice, who is on the awakening path, has told me that they feel social media now has this very dark, negative, and kind of toxic, parasitic energy. And they've also said things like they're feeling drained, they're feeling empty, depressed, overwhelmed, or just kind of icky and not good when they're using it. And also that they feel really addicted and they don't want to be. So given all of this, the question is, why do we continue to use it? And in this mini workshop, which is really based upon my own wisdom, which is learned through my own personal experiences, I'm going to cover the current pitfalls of social media and why we're so addicted to it and continue to use it even when it doesn't feel good. And then some very practical kind of how-to tips. For example, how to use it more smartly and more intentionally and consciously so that it actually works for you, and how to feel better when using it, how to lessen your addiction to it and have more personal agency. If you use it for business, how to lessen your dependency on it. And if you're thinking about actually stopping using social media, like I am, how you can exit without there being a detriment to you. And then finally, I'll address a few buts and objections that you might have to some of the things that I've shared. Now, all the things I'm going to share are relevant to all social media platforms. There's a slight focus in terms of my thinking, creating this around Instagram, because that's the main platform that I've been using, but it is relevant to all the different platforms. And there are so many of them now. They seem to be growing in number. So let's start with the various potential pitfalls or negative consequences of using social media. So the first thing is, social media really sucks your time and energy. I would go on social media planning to just be on it for a few minutes, and then an hour later, I'm still scrolling and wasting my time and energy. So it really is it just kind of sucks it out of you. This relates to the addictive element. So it is designed very cleverly to get us completely addicted. And I think pretty much everybody who regularly uses social media, whether they admit it or not, they are addicted. And I was addicted too. It also has a negative effect on your nervous system. So it can really kind of jack up your nervous system and create kind of more anxiety and agitation, that kind of fight or flight feeling, or can even result in more of a freeze response, which is kind of where you shut down. I think it also can fuel feelings of lack or feelings of not being enough because we see what other people appear to be doing. And that's really critical, because I tell you, from all the people I know who are on social media, most of them, the way they come across on social media, it's not actually how they are. So there is a kind of like deceptive element to it. It's not as it seems, but we end up comparing our real life to what we see online, and then it can kind of create this, I guess, this sense of comparison and these maybe feelings of lack or not enough. It can also limit our original thought, our creativity, and our connection to our inner wisdom. So when we're on, these social media platforms and we're just getting bombarded with other people's content, our heads end up getting really full with other people's views and beliefs and content. And sometimes we can even just start believing what others say as the truth, rather than actually being with ourselves and looking within and kind of creating our own, thoughts and perspectives and beliefs from that place. And I certainly found that myself. And also, if we're consuming a lot, so if we're not really creating much, we're consuming more than we're creating, and this applies to social media and life in general, it's really not good for us, because creativity is in our nature. We are creative beings. And so we need to be creating, all the time. And on social media, especially if we're just scrolling and consuming, we're not doing that. And that's one of the reasons why it doesn't feel good. It can also become an echo chamber. So depending on who we follow and, what content we choose to consume, we really are creating a bit of an echo chamber for ourselves. And it can then appear like that is the world. It kind of becomes, it's this digital world, and it becomes our world. And it's actually not the real world. It is just a very narrow manufactured lens into elements of the world. So yeah, we can become kind of quite narrow focused, narrow minded. And yeah, it's got that kind of echo chamber feel. Also, social media highly manipulates us. Even if you think you're not being manipulated, you are. The AI and all of the systems, they manipulate you. And if you haven't seen The Social Dilemma, which is a docufilm, I think it's actually on Netflix. I don't have Netflix anymore. But I consider that to almost be like revelation of the method. So they are explaining to you like how much they manipulate you and how they do it. So it's pretty wild. It can also bring out our narcissism. So, I'm not talking about narcissistic personality disorder. We all have the ability to be narcissistic, or kind of, self-absorbed, self-indulgent, egotistical, all these things. We all have that capability. And social media really helps to draw that out of people. And that is never going to be a good thing for any of us. Also, there's so much stimulation. There's just so much input. And really it overwhelms and assaults the senses. And it can really drain us and burn us out. I certainly feel, if I've spent a lot of time on social media, I feel completely just like tired, overwhelmed, drained, flat. And that is, largely because of just the sheer amount of stuff that we are, taking in, and we're not designed to do that. So that's another reason. It also offers us a level of connection with others that we really crave, but it's actually a superficial connection, and it's digital, which doesn't really satisfy our heart and soul. It's not true connection. And so it's just this like strange kind of connection, but not. And I think that is unhealthy as well. And finally, it has conditioned us to have a very reduced attention span, while simultaneously keeping us on the platform, just constantly scrolling and seeking. So I use the analogy like cats with lasers, like, so it's like cats just following lasers around, or magpies looking for the next shiny object. Social media really is a weapon of mass distraction. And so, we go on there and we're unable to hold, I think there's been studies that have shown, that people's attention span with videos, for example, is, like a minute or less, because we are just constantly seeking, the next thing, and we're just super, super distracted. So that's a really big one. So then I think one of the things that applies to all of this is that we are not really, as humans, designed to live like this. So none of this stuff is natural for us, and it's not in alignment with the way that our human mind bodies are actually designed. And it's also not aligned with our soul. And so I use the term soulful depression. It's just this sense of feeling low and empty at a kind of deep soul level. And I think that social media has, really contributed to that. And also screen time and electromagnetic frequencies in general is not conducive to good health and well-being, especially in the evening or just before bed. So if you're, looking at screens, you're getting the blue light, you're getting the EMFs, and you're also getting the actual mental stimulation of all these different, things that you're looking at. And that's not going to help your sleep. It doesn't help your hormones, doesn't help any element of your health. It can actually be highly detrimental. And so that is another thing. So moving on to why we are so addicted to it and why we continue to use it even when it doesn't feel good to us and we know that it's not great for us in general. So I think it can be a combination of various different factors, and there's actually 8 reasons that I've personally identified, and I think it depends on the person. But let me run through these, and you can kind of identify whether you resonate with any of these things that I'm sharing. So the first thing is a kind of neurological addiction and a dopamine addiction. We have been so conditioned, a bit like, or actually just like, Pavlov's dogs. I'm sure you've probably heard of the Pavlov experiment with dogs. And, I see this when, I was in a restaurant not long ago and somebody had their notifications on their phone and it pinged really loudly. And I just saw everybody flinch. That is Pavlov's dogs. There is such a deep conditioning. We see something flash up on our screen or we hear the ping, and we are just subconsciously completely conditioned to react. So we're kind of addicted to that, and addicted to the dopamine hits that we get from having likes, from having comments, and all of that kind of thing. And then it just gets more and more and more addictive. On the subject of addiction, there's also a lot of addiction to drama, doom, gloom, and just kind of negative or stressy stuff. And this is a loop that can just keep getting reinforced, because it's really about our nervous system and unhealed trauma as well, which is of course related. So even though it sounds counterintuitive, our nervous system will seek out, on a subconscious level, we will seek out things that feel familiar to us, because familiarity to the nervous system means safety, and we're always looking for safety. And so if our nervous system is used to kind of stress and negativity, we will unconsciously seek that out so that we can get that familiarity, even though it's not good for us, even though on a conscious level we may not be doing that. That's actually what we can do. And this is why, all of the doom and drama content is just so it draws so much attention and people get so animated over it. And I've seen this, you know, a lot myself over the last 3 years. So there's that. Also, you know, as I said before, we want connection, but social media doesn't give us true connection. But we also get a sense of connection by actually engaging in things like gossip, outrage, and conflict, and arguing with people. So even though, again, it's not a healthy connection, we're kind of subconsciously always seeking this stuff out. And so this is why people often bond over, you know, gossip or outrage. It's a very common human behavior, and social media really plays on that and fuels that, which isn't healthy. There's also the fear of missing out, which I think social media perpetuates. So, you know, I've even had people say to me like, oh, I don't want to use social media anymore, but then I won't get to see the content, and, you know, I might miss something. And so there is this kind of FOMO. We just want everything and we don't want to miss anything. But at the same time, we don't actually spend the time taking in any of the stuff because there's just too much stuff. Also, I think it's become a deeply ingrained habit. It's just a way of life. Like, it's just what we do. Everyone is just on social media. And it's just become such a habit that it is just ingrained into our unconscious behavior. And it's just become this, you know, this normal way of life and part of people's routines. You know, most people I know have told me that the very first thing they do in the morning is check their phone, and the last thing they do before they go to bed is check their phone. So it has really become part of our, you know, daily routine and daily habits. And also, it's a distraction from being with ourselves. It's a form of escapism and avoidance from other stuff. And again, like most of these things, it isn't conscious. It's this kind of it's coming from the subconscious. It's an unconscious way of escaping, avoiding. The same with TV watching, you know, Netflix or whatever, binge watching. It's, you know, it's all that like same kind of stuff. And also there's I guess a culturally, societally conditioned that you should be on social media, that you should be posting all the time, that you should be showing up, you should be speaking out online, you should be doing this, you should be using it for your business, you need to do this, you need to do that. There is a lot of that, and I kind of fell into that trap, feeling like, you know, oh God, I need to be doing this, I need to be doing that. And again, that is just conditioning. And the last thing is that ultimately, deep down, we don't really want to change. Change is very difficult. And what we really want is certainty. Again, this links to safety. We want certainty and safety. We want to stick with what we know. And so even though consciously we may say like, oh, I don't want to do this and I want to do something different, we'll just keep doing the thing, because on a subconscious level, we want that certainty. We want to really stick with what is familiar to us. And we can also have, you know, subconscious blocks from unhealed trauma and conditioning, which just stop us from doing the things that we consciously would like to do. So those are the 8 different reasons that I've identified. Maybe you can think of more. But rather than judging ourselves and shaming ourselves for kind of, you know, falling into any of these traps and behaving in some of the ways that I've explained, I find it most helpful to get curious. So I have a little exercise about self-awareness. So it's 12 questions for self-reflection. So you can pause between each of these to write them down and answer them, or, you know, or listen and then come back to it afterwards. But I really encourage you to grab a journal, notepad, whatever, and actually answer these 12 questions, because self-awareness is the first step. And we do kid ourselves and we do lie to ourselves all the time to justify the things that we are or aren't doing. So it's important to do this exploration and to try and be honest with ourselves, because it's this inner standing that actually helps us to move forward. So this being the first step, if we're not aware, then nothing much more is going to come of it. So here are the 12 questions. So number 1, why are you still using social media even though it doesn't feel great? Number 2, in what way does it genuinely serve your highest good, and what do you gain by using it? In what ways is it detrimental to you and your well-being? What do you think you'll lose by not using it or using it less? What's the fear? How many Instagram or other social media posts do you save or screenshot and never come back to or use in a meaningful way? How much time do you give to social media? How many times a day or how frequently are you checking your phone, and how much time do you spend on it? And it's usually much higher than you think. And in relation to that, what else could you be doing with that time that you're spending? What's the consciousness of the content and its creators that you're consuming? Are you consuming or creating? How much time are you spending on each? How does using social media in general feel to you? Is it expansive, light, joyful, invigorating, nourishing, energizing? Or is it not so good? Maybe constricted, heavy, flat, anxious, depleted, drained, or empty? Does it improve your focus or distract you? Is it using you and controlling you? Do you feel in control and that you're using it, or out of control that it's using you? And finally, are you willing to stop doing what doesn't serve you in a positive way? And this makes me think of the famous Hippocrates quote, which is, before you heal someone, ask him if he's willing to give up the things that make him sick. And this applies to everything. It's not just physical illness, but it's really about, are you willing to give up the things that aren't serving you? Okay. So if you still want to use social media after answering these questions, then I'm going to share some practical how-tos with you. So the first thing really is around how to use it more smartly and intentionally and consciously so that it works for you, how to lessen your addiction to it and have more agency, and how to feel better when you're using it. So first tip, this is around intentional use and what you consume. So how credible are your influences or teachers? Are they actually embodying what they speak of? Are they walking the talk? Do they have lived experience and wisdom? So be very, very discerning and selective. Unfollow accounts that are not serving you. If you don't know them and you don't find their content of true meaningful value and it doesn't feel good to you, you have absolutely no reason to follow them. Now, if you are following accounts of people that you kind of know, you have a bit of a relationship with, and you still want to be able to message them if you want, you can just mute them. So this on Instagram, you can anyway. I don't know about the other platforms because I don't use them. But on Instagram, you just go to the person's profile, you click on the following button, and then you just get an option to mute them. So you're still connected, but you just don't see any of their content. Also, rather than casting the net wide and just consuming all sorts of content, decide on what kind of thing you really want to learn about or get help with, and just focus in on that content. And this can apply to anything, like not necessarily just on social media. But we tend to cast the net so wide and we're just consuming so many different things. I personally found it helpful to just focus in on certain topics and the people who have the very best content on those specific topics, and unfollow or mute everybody else. And then on that note, if there are any accounts that you really love, you know, you have a few real favorites, you can select the little bell icon on Instagram. And again, I don't know with the other platforms, but if you click the little bell icon, you can get in-app notifications. Not general phone notifications so that your phone is pinging all the time, but like actual notifications within the app. I'm pretty sure that this is possible. So those are some of the things you can do to more intentionally consume. When it comes to intentionally posting, I personally have found it really helpful when I'm posting or looking to create a post is to firstly ask myself, why? Why am I actually creating this? Am I creating it to serve people in a positive, meaningful way? Or am I just adding to the drama? Am I just looking for attention and validation with likes and followers? You know, and I have done this in the past. I have shared, you know, certain things that I knew would get a lot of attention. And then I was like, why did I share that? And we just, again, it's all just this unconscious stuff. And so when we bring the awareness to it, that's incredibly powerful because we're able to observe, this is what I'm doing. So be very clear on, you know, why you're doing it and what is your purpose and your intention around doing it. So just be really honest with yourself and be clear on, you know, the whole point of you posting. And is it to serve others, or is it to kind of feed your addiction or feed your ego? So just understanding that, or understanding that, is incredibly helpful. Number 3, number of platforms. So how many platforms are you on? And are they all highly valuable to you? How much time do you spend on each one? Is that time productive? And, you know, just get rid of any that are not serving you. You know, I did this before. I was on various different channels and I narrowed it down to Instagram and a private Telegram channel. So just think about all the different things that you're on and, you know, which is the most valuable, and do you really need to be using them all? And if there are any that are highly valuable to you and they feel good to use, then by all means, keep them. Number 4, some tactical things you can do to actually lessen the addictiveness. Firstly, you can turn your general phone notifications off. How people can have the pinging or the flashing up of notifications on their phone absolutely amazes me. It would send me absolutely insane, and I have never done it. It's bad enough as it is without the notifications, so turn your notifications off. You can also try going cold turkey for a week to have a reset. This is like going to reset your dopamine, and it's going to, you know, kind of, it is like just going cold turkey. And I guess the more that this horrifies you, the more reason you probably have to do it. But if it is way too much to bear, you can try doing things like this. Have your phone off for the first hour of the day. So just have it off at night and you just commit to yourself, I'm not going to turn it on for the first hour. And instead do practices that actually serve you and set you up for the day. So it could be breath work, meditation, journaling, gratitude exercise, you know, some stretching, whatever, but something that's actually going to serve you. And then you can turn your phone on and use your phone. But that is incredibly powerful, that first hour. Also, you can try having a day off social media per week. So maybe a Sunday, you just don't have any social media use at all, and maybe just don't use your phone at all and just go and do something nice, go into nature, whatever. You could also just do other things that you enjoy. So, you know, hobbies, things that you love, create some stuff, do something nice for others, help other people in real life, you know, and mix up your routine. You know, like we can get stuck in social media and that kind of becomes our go-to for any sort of spare time that we have. But there's so many other things you can do. So by consciously doing more of those things, you're actually going to automatically spend less time on your phone, especially when you're having your day off social media, or, you know, regular breaks off of it. But I think ultimately it is really wise to look at the deeper reasons why you use social media, and the way that you use it, and the amount of time that you spend using it. So that's why, you know, I shared those questions with you earlier. It's very, very important to really look at those deeper reasons and to do that deeper work, because we can have all the best intentions, but if we don't address the things that are driving these behaviors and blocking us from changing, then not a lot is going to happen. So that is something that I think we all would be wise to look at. Okay, so now I want to talk about, if you have an account that you use for business, how you can lessen your dependency on it. So what if your account were to disappear tomorrow? What if they just deleted it? Like, would that be okay? Or would that be an absolute, you know, disaster for you? Because I think that dependency on any social media platforms is not great. And it actually doesn't serve your quest for sovereignty either, because you are reliant on somebody else's platform. So you can be smart, you can be resourceful, you can think outside of the box that you've been conditioned into. And I can tell you that follower numbers mean very little. It's actually the impact you can make on people that matters. And most consumers on social media are just cats following lasers and magpies looking for the next shiny object. And I appreciate it's going to be different for everybody and different for every kind of business. And I think when it comes to products, physical products, Instagram and certain other channels can be effective. But especially if your business is more online or kind of personal, non-physical services, I don't think that social media is that effective. And there are other ways. So I personally actually celebrate when I lose followers on social media or my email list, because actually it's about alignment, it's about energy. I really had that shift in perspective. And I also remove anyone from my mailing list who hasn't opened an email in 6 months or more. So I'm always like clearing energy, and I don't care if people unfollow me, and I don't care, you know, whether people, you know, like my content or not, because actually that doesn't really matter. What matters is that you are there for the people that are aligned with you. So if you don't have a mailing list, I would create one. If you don't have a website, you could create one. I remember when I first started my coaching business years ago, I created a basic website using a platform called Wix, literally in one weekend, did a couple of YouTube tutorials, and I'm not very techie, but I managed to create a basic website. You could also start a podcast, a Substack, or host a blog on your website. These things are really, really easy to do. I mean, just to set up my podcast, it literally took me a few hours in total. So these are some of the things that you can do so that you're not as dependent. I have spoken with people recently who are totally dependent on social media. They don't even have a mailing list. It's like, well, if social media goes, then I just like literally have like no contacts. And that to me just doesn't seem smart. So yeah, sure, you can use social media, but have alternatives. Don't have all your eggs in one basket. And I think that is very sensible, but it's also very liberating, because then you don't have this dependency in this sense that you have to just, you know, keep using it, or you worry if you're sharing controversial content that you're worrying that you might get your account deleted. And I know people that have had big followings and they get deleted and they didn't have an email list, and then they start a new account and they get another big following, and then they still don't have a mailing list. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. People that really value your content will want to join a mailing list. So I think it's just important to really just think bigger, think outside the box, think about different ways of doing things. So finally, if you want to stop using social media, then there are a few things that I suggest you could do to kind of lessen the pain of the withdrawal and not have detriment to you. So the first thing you can do is connect directly, or request to connect directly, in terms of swapping private contact details with people who you want to stay in touch with. So if you have Instagram friends, for example, or Facebook friends, and you want to stay, you get on and maybe you've had some good conversations and you want to stay in contact with them, well, you can just swap email, swap phone number, just reach out to them. Also, over time, before you leave, you can encourage people to join your own platform or your mailing list if you have one. So this is something that I'm doing. I'm not going to be on social media, but I know there's lots of people who enjoy my content. So I'm giving them the opportunity to join the mailing list if they want to, so that they can continue to get all of my content that I'm producing and all of the, offers that I have. You can also, as I mentioned before, focus on things that you really enjoy to replace the addiction and to get dopamine in a healthy way, because dopamine isn't really, really bad in itself. It's like kind of like dopamine is like the reward chemical. So you can do things that you actually really love and enjoy that still give you that dopamine, which is healthy, but it's not in a really kind of addictive social media way. Because if you do leave social media and you've been using it a lot, you are going to have a big black hole in your life. And I think it is a really good idea to, take the opportunity to do some things that you enjoy, maybe start a new hobby, maybe pick something back up that you haven't been doing. There's so many things that you can do. There's so much to enjoy in life. So that's something that you can do. And, go into creation mode, spend that time creating new things, making new connections. For me, it's very exciting. And this is why I'm really excited to be leaving social media, because I'm seeing all these new pathways opening and all these new possibilities and opportunities. And then again, as I mentioned before, the deeper inner work. So even though it can be unpleasant, it really gives us that opportunity to do some of that work and address some of the things that you've been using social media to mask or avoid or distract from, because that is what's ultimately going to help you to not be addicted to social media and not, wanting to keep kind of going back, even though you don't really want to, and you've got that inner conflict going on. So that work is important for all of us. And I think ultimately it's rooted in self-love and self-worth. Like, how much do we actually value ourselves? How much do we value our time and our energy? That, in my experience, appears to be, at the root of, of a lot of this stuff. And so that's very much worth looking into. And it's incredibly valuable and fruitful work to be doing with ourselves. And so finally, I want to just share a few possible buts or objections that I've heard from others that I've been communicating with lately about social media usage. So three particular things that I've heard people say is, we need to stay on social media because we need to reach people. Another thing is, we can't let them win, referring to, the controllers, blah, blah, blah. So like, we can't let them win, we can't back down, that's what they want, all this kind of stuff. And the third thing is, I've had people say, oh, but you've spent all this time building up to all, all the followers that you have, that's such a waste, it's such a shame, it's just so sad. So those are three responses that I've had, and you may be thinking, the same in relation to the stuff that I've shared. And rather than answering those questions directly in terms of what I think, I would encourage you to really think about whether you think those statements are actually completely true. So when you make a statement like that, you have a thought and you make a statement, first get really clear on what it is that you actually mean by it. So when you say, oh, like, we can't let them win, or well, we need to reach people, actually be clear on what you really mean, get a bit more detail. And then ask yourself, is it true? Can I absolutely know it to be totally true? And we can also look at, well, where did that belief or thought come from? What is it based on? Because often these statements that we make, they are based in conditioning. We're just parroting things that we've heard other people say, or we're just saying it because that's what we've been conditioned to believe. But I find it very, very powerful when we're clear on what we mean, and then we ask ourselves, is it true? Can I absolutely know it to be true? That can be very, very helpful, because if we can't absolutely know it to be true, then that means that there's an alternative. That means that there's something different. And so whenever you find yourself with a limiting thought or an objection or a block, being clear on it and then asking yourself, is it absolutely, totally true? That can be incredibly helpful. And then you can also look at, okay, well, where does that actual, belief come from? And I found that questioning technique to be incredibly, incredibly helpful. And it can also allow us to start looking outside the box, because when we realize that what most of we say as statements actually isn't fully true, or we can't know it to be absolutely true, that actually opens us up to other possibilities and to other ways of doing things and to other perspectives. And so, yeah, that's something you can apply to anything in your life. And it's one of my favorite questioning techniques to really understand yourself. So I think that's all I want to share. I hope that you found it helpful. You've picked up some good tips. I'm sure you've resonated with some of it. And I really hope that, you revisit it, especially answering those questions at the start and really thinking about putting yourself first and doing what is best for you, and not letting social media take over your life or be detrimental to your own well-being. So that's it for me for now. Have a wonderful day and talk to you soon.